Hi everyone, welcome back to the Art of Business English episode. I think it's 132 of the Art of Business English, and this week we are looking at some good communication skills. So we're looking at how you can become a better listener, and we're going to be looking at a concept called boomeranging or harpooning, which may sound a bit strange. So before we get any further, I'd like to welcome Loic back to the podcast. How are you, buddy?
Thank you for having me. Despite what it looks like, I'm actually in the dark. I'm in Africa and there is a shortage of electricity. But as we say here, which is a saying, it's not really English, a boer maak 'n plan, which essentially means a farmer makes a plan. So we've made a plan here. We have light.
It looks very well lit. I'm actually at my school, and I'm just under a fluorescent light. But it's good to have you here all the way from South Africa.
Thank you.
And I hope you've had a lovely, well, you're in the South, so it's been nice and cold. I've just got back from holidays, so I'm getting back into the swing of working, and
nice.
It's not much fun, but here we are. This week we're going to be looking at listening skills. Most people, would you agree, Loic, that most people are not good at listening?
Yes, I would. I think it's kind of taught or understood in business that you should be a great speaker. Mm-hmm. And I think it's underrated. Listening is definitely underrated.
Yeah, listening. Who wants to listen when you can talk about everything and sell, and it's all about me?
Exactly.
So what are what are the problems with not being a good listener?
So here's the thing. Being a good listener shows empathy. Being a good listener gets you into the conversation and shows the other person that you are interested in what's going on, logically. If you do all the talking, you're also not going to do much learning. So there's a lot more to learn by listening than there is by talking. So it's got a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of people find it difficult to listen a lot of the time because they're like sidetracked, or they say they're busy. So it's and there's many things that are, interrupting us, or things that are taking away our attention. So it's I think it's difficult. Sometimes, someone comes into your office, you're in the middle of something, and and I'm guilty of this too. I'm working on my computer, and one of my staff members asks me, I'm like, yeah, and you're not really giving them undivided attention, which makes you seem a bit like you're unapproachable. Like, I don't want to interrupt you. So therefore, it can create like a closed door policy where don't interrupt me. And I think some of the benefits of listening are that you really understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's right.
You understand what's happening around you. You get insight. And
you get insight.
Yeah, and you really can understand the point of view of other people, and therefore, you can become surely you're much better at problem solving, especially if you understand some of the issues better that are affecting people within the organization. And if you're listening to the experts, or the people who really know their staff within your organization, then you can really make informed decisions, as opposed to maybe not listening enough to people who you should. I don't know. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've got two concepts today which I wanted to discuss, and it's quite high level. So sorry to all of my listeners who maybe are at intermediate level of English, but we're going to be looking at listening for the next 2 weeks. So in the final episode, we'll give you some tips on how you can improve your listening skills. But I guess we're going to start with looking at the benefits of listening. And all of these techniques are relevant in your native language as well. So you can adopt these techniques now and try and practice them in your native language with your family, your friends, or your colleagues, and then transition and start to try it in English-speaking environments. So I'm reading a great book, and it's called called Dads and Their Daughters. It's actually by Bruce Robinson. He's actually an Australian. He's from, I think he's a Perth boy like me. And this is a fantastic book, especially if you're a dad like I am and you've got daughters. Because understanding and getting on, getting on the level with your kids is really important. And some people say, it's easy. It's really easy if you're a father with my son, because we just go and kick a football. Whereas they have this idea, that daughters can be much more complicated. So I guess that can sometimes create communication issues between fathers and their daughters. Whereas this book's fantastic because it teaches you or explains to you all the things that the author believes you can do to really promote a great relationship with your daughter, and this will then lead to her being a much more confident and stable adult in the future. So because all of these, the role of the father in the daughter's life is extremely important, because at the end of the day, women often marry an interpretation of their father. So it's really important that you connect well with them, and that you lead by examples, and that you effectively communicate and get on their level. So I thought I'd take some of the great tips about listening, because I think they were really relevant, and I think they're relevant for anyone. If you're a leader, manager, if you're dealing with people, it's really important to be a great listener. So we're looking at boomeranging. So what's a boomerang, Loic?
It sounds like it's something that comes back to you.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah, so it's not about the other person. I guess whatever it is that you're doing, it's coming back to you. Yeah, that's my understanding.
A boomerang is from the first Australians. It's like from an Indigenous Australia. It was made by the Indigenous Australian people. And it's like this curved, wooden curved, very flat device that was used for hunting. And literally when you throw it, it spins and it goes really far, and it comes back to you. And literally you can throw it and catch it again. Or you can just throw it and hopefully smack some poor animal in the back of the head and knock it unconscious, so that you can hunt it and eat it. And that's what it was. So it was actually a hunting tool, but we use this expression boomerang because if you throw a boomerang, it always comes back to you. And a harpoon. What's a harpoon? That's a funny word, no? A harpoon. What's a harpoon?
Yeah, so a harpoon is more like also a hunting device, but it goes in one direction, basically. So it's not expected to bounce back to you. In the actual fact, it goes straight into your target.
Yep. It's like an arrow, but a harpoon is typically used in hunting like whales or seals, because it goes into the thick, it's got the prongs on it. So it goes into the blubber or the thick skin of the animal. And once it's in it, it's very difficult to get it out. It's not like an arrow. It goes in and you can pull it straight out. But because a harpoon's got the two teeth coming off it, once it's embedded in your skin, it's very difficult to get out. So the concept we're looking at today is boomeranging versus harpooning, or harpooning versus boomeranging. And
all right.
Yeah. Basically, most people boomerang. And, what it means is that if you bring the conversation back to yourself, you are in fact boomeranging. And unfortunately, most people do that. I don't know why, but I'm guilty of it. And I think it's something that you learn when you're young. I mean, my mother loves to boomerang, and I don't think she realizes that she does it a lot of the time. But people love to tell their stories. Like, oh, yeah, I did that too. Oh, yeah, yeah. And I also think people boomerang because they think that they're actually being good listeners by identifying with that person, if that makes sense. So for example, I'll give you an example. If I say to you, oh, Loic, I've been struggling a bit at work lately because my boss has given me some extra work, and I'm really stressed out. What would be an example of boomeranging?
So it sounds to me like I would pick up on that, and I'd probably say, hey, you know what? That happened to me last week as well. And so what I was feeling at the time is that I was really overwhelmed, and blah, blah, blah. I make it all about myself instead of bringing it back to you.
Exactly. You're just like,
I'm not being very empathetic, in fact.
yeah. So that's a good example that you gave me, because like what most people think they're doing is sympathizing with the person. Like, oh yeah, that happened to me too, because blah, 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 blah. Because you think, oh no, but I'm identifying with this person because the same thing happened to me. So I'm telling them, yeah, I feel for you. But it's not really an effective way to really understand someone, because it's just shutting down the conversation because you bring it back to yourself. So it's really simple, the concept of boomeranging, and we're all guilty of it. It's really easy to do.
It's easy.
Yeah, I mean, we teach people English all the time, and lots of people want to tell us, like, you know, oh, really, their little story. And like, oh yeah, well, listen, when I was traveling around Southeast Asia, and it's, you know, you like to share experiences with your students and wow them. So yeah, it's difficult. And I mean, it can be really nasty as well, boomeranging. For example, you know, as a leader or a manager, sometimes if you're boomerang, or you really just shut people down and you don't make them really feel comfortable about coming to you. For example, if a new employee comes to you and they're a bit nervous and they've got a problem, an example of like negative boomeranging would be like, well, I went through the same issue when I started the company, so you'll be fine. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. It's like, oh, boom. Like, really, you're just shutting people down. And we, you know, sometimes we do it really subconsciously without thinking. So, yeah, we should try and avoid boomeranging. That's why I said earlier at the start of this episode, you can do it in your own language. You should start trying to do it now, and just see how it goes. So, can you think of any other examples of boomeranging?
Well, let me ask you this. So the process begins with a question. Is that right?
Yeah, someone asks you a question, or someone brings a problem to you, or they bring some, well, not even that. You're just talking. Like, for example, let's think of a topic. Give me a topic, for example, any topic.
Yeah. Well, if you bring it back to, for example, an experience that you had with a marketing problem. So let's say you were trying to reach out to a client, and the client was unprepared, and so you couldn't see them. You know, and so the person that you're speaking to might react in what they think is a sympathetic way, but it's not solving your problem. Yeah, and it's not empathy.
Yeah, it's not empathy. It's like, oh, they're just telling you about their situation. But for example, if you give me a topic like, oh, Loic, just started reading this new book on improving your relationship with your daughter.
Yeah.
Bring it back to you, buddy.
Exactly. So let's boomerang it right back to me, and I'll say, you know what? I was reading a book just like that about a month ago. And so what I got out of it is, I think that this is what we should do in life. And meanwhile, completely overriding your point, right?
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay. And then if you boomerang it back to yourself and then you don't follow it up with a question as well, like that's conversation dead. Another thing that's important is, like, people, when they get nervous or they're not really sure in social situations, when they get nervous, they don't know what to do. So they start to talk about themselves. Or, you know, because they're nervous, they're not feeling confident. They're like, oh, well, you know, I did this. And, you know, the conversation's always coming back to them. And this can be quite, you know, people can turn people off, like, oh, God, I was talking to that guy, but he just kept on talking about himself. And some people do it really unintentionally, but they're nervous, so that they don't know what questions to ask. I don't know what to say. So I don't know what to say converts into, I'll just talk about my experiences because that's all I know. And that's the only way that I feel that I can relate to, you know, this conversation by basing my input into this discussion on my experience, because if I don't talk about what I know, then I feel very insecure and very uncomfortable. So, you know, that's maybe another reason why people boomerang. What about the opposite?
Harpooning?
Yeah, harpooning. Yeah. So I guess that's the complete opposite. So that basically means what?
So let's say I ask you a question about, I don't know, where are you on that project with finance? Were you able to get your point across, and did they agree to your terms?
Yeah. So I explained to you, oh, well, yeah, the project's going well. We had a few problems. They didn't really agree to our terms, and I'm not really sure what I should do to close this deal.
Okay, so how did you leave it with them?
Sorry?
See what I did? How did you leave it with them? So can you see?
Yeah, so how do I leave it with them? Yeah. Yeah, well, at the moment, the ball's in their court. We have given them a counter offer, and I'm hoping that over the weekend, their team will, discuss it and come back to us with something a bit more concrete.
Do you think they've got the budget to do this?
Well, that's a good question. So yeah, you can see we're keeping this.
You can see where we're going with this. Yeah,
you're getting into the conversation. Well, I think it's important to state so that harpooning is when you're like staying with someone and you are, you're showing interest in them. You're actively listening because you're listening to what the actual issues that they're facing or the things that they're saying, and you're staying with them and asking follow-up questions. But what's important to note is that you should, this is not the Spanish Inquisition. Like, we're not here to be like a detective to ask constantly, boom, boom, boom. But I mean, harpooning is really effective when people come to you with a problem.
Right.
So asking, follow-up questions to really understand their feelings as opposed to like the facts of the matter can really lead you to understanding what's going on with people. Let's have a look. And it's really good for another point that I'd like to point out is that it's really good for like social situations, because sometimes we don't really feel comfortable in social situations, especially when we are not native or we don't know people. And instead of nervously talking about yourself, you just, can use it to explore like other people, what they're doing, what their jobs are. And you can ask simple questions like, hey, Loic, what do you love most about your job?
Well, I like the freedom. It gives me freedom because I'm working on the outside. I'm in external sales, so I get a lot of freedom out of that.
Oh, so you travel a lot around? Are you traveling a lot?
Yeah, in fact, I do. I travel regularly out the country.
Oh, well, that must be great. Or is it a grind?
Yeah, sometimes it can be a grind. It can get a bit out of hand. It can be monotonous if it's the same routes, for example.
Yeah,
so you can see how we're doing it, right?
Yeah. So, so I guess staying in a hotel sometimes isn't always what it's cracked up to be.
Nah, not when you're staying there for the 10th time.
Yeah, okay, I completely understand that. Okay, so yeah, again, I started boomeranging at the end. I completely understand that. So, I mean, you could say, instead of I completely understand that, you could say, well, I understand how you feel, as a saying, I completely understand it. So again, these are examples of how we harpoon. And it's a nice way to engage people in conversation. Let me give you some other examples in travel. Now, this is just to show people the difference between like harpooning and boomeranging, so it's very clear for them. Travel is the topic area, okay? Great. What did you enjoy most about the place? Okay, so if someone tells you about their trip, that's an example of harpooning. So you're showing genuine interest in what they enjoyed most about the trip they went on. Whereas boomeranging would be, oh yeah, I went there too. Let me tell you about the time and again, you're making it about yourself. Another example, children. Children. People love.
Yes.
Talk about their children. My child or my son is, the captain of the football team, which is great. So, for example, an example of harpooning would be, what did you find best about the school? So you're asking people what they found or find best about the school where their children go to. Whereas when you're boomeranging, you'd say, oh yeah, our kids are at this school and they do dull. Okay, so again, you're talking about yourself and your kids. Work, very common one. What do you enjoy most about your job? I just asked you that question before.
Yes.
Example of, of harpooning. Whereas a boomerang would be, yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work. So what I did was this. Okay, and finally, stress. This is the big one.
Yeah.
Because most people say, oh, I'm so stressed. And what is the typical response you get from this? If I say to you, Loic, oh, I'm so stressed, what do people generally say?
Yeah, I'll tell you how stressed I am.
Yeah, me too.
And then I'll bring it right back to me, right?
Yeah. Oh, Jackie, I'm so stressed. It's terrible, isn't it? Oh, especially with all this COVID business, blah, blah, blah. So again, yeah, you bring it back on yourself. So that really is it. I mean, it's not like rocket science here, but
sure.
But yeah, that's the difference between boomeranging and harpooning. Would you like to add anything about active listening? I mean, active listening is a great skill, especially if you're a owner. We're going to discuss more on this next week. But what have you got any tips for our listeners, Loic? On this?
Well, I think just to get back to your point real quick, I think something that is underrated is if you could think of it as a combination of boomeranging and harpooning. So, for example, you tell me something about your day, and I might boomerang initially that right back to myself and tell you about what kind of a day I had, but I might say something about an experience that I had during that day and throw it right back to you. So I've shared a little bit about what happened here, but I'm throwing it back to you. So it's a combination of boomeranging by showing a bit of sympathy and empathy because I had the same feeling, the same experience, but I'll kick it right back to you. Usually what happens is people don't do that. And that's a pure boomerang.
Yeah.
But you could combine it.
I like that. Yeah, you can combine it. Okay, I like that. I like that. So you are delivering, a bit of yourself perspective. You've boomeranged back yourself, but then you're aware that this conversation needs to be maintained. So then you are engaging again with follow-up with that person. And I guess we need to explain to our listeners that it really is situational. I mean, you can't just be like, harpooning your way through life, because sometimes you need to give your opinion and your experience will help. Can it really help in situations? Well, when we had this problem, we did this, which is, of course, you talking about your experience. Where it's most effective, I think, harpooning is when, you've got someone who is really coming to you with maybe some form of their emotional problem, and then they're not really sure, or you're not really sure what the true reason is behind it. So it's just about giving people their space to really explain to you and being a bit sensitive to people who maybe are feeling a bit nervous or stressed about something. Maybe they're having there's a bit of, arguments or friction between people in the office. And instead of just getting angry and saying, this is ridiculous, I refuse to accept this behavior in the organization, you're using some harpooning techniques to really understand what is the root cause of these issues. Everything is situational. Everything requires you to have a certain level of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
But I like that tip. You can boomerang a little bit and then harpoon at the end. Good. Well, I don't know what else to say. That was about it for this episode. I just wanted to start with this concept because I think it's quite simple in terms of the theory. But I want you guys to go away and try and put it into practice, and we'll come back next week and see how we went.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, buddy. What else?
Well, the power of questions, I guess, just as a parting shot, the dark art of listening. So it helps you win with very little effort. The power of questions. So let's say by asking a lot of questions, but not in a Spanish Inquisition way, logically, not a complete harpooning continuously, it shows that you're interested in what they're saying. And they walk away with what they think was a great conversational, positive experience. But it took very little effort on your part. you literally were just asking open questions and closed questions. I think we've touched on this in the past in terms of creating small talk. And, you know, I think questions engage the mind. I think that's the point. So, and it doesn't matter whether the person answers the question or not. When somebody asks you a question, what happens?
Yeah.
You see, I got you thinking already, right? Like what happens? Now you're thinking, okay, well.
What happens? You need to start thinking about
I just did it to you. So yeah, really the power of questions, it'll give you a lot more insight. It gives you a lot more information. And you just kind of sit back every now and again, you sympathize, boomerang the thing, but then throw it right back.
Yeah. And you never know, like there's so many interesting people in the world. And it's nice to meet. I mean, it's nice to meet new, interesting people. And it's also nice to have meaningful conversations, I feel.
Yes.
And I think that becomes more and more relevant as we get older. I think we go through stages in life where we have some really close friends when we're young, when we're teenagers, and we have these very long, what we think are deep and meaningful conversations. And for maybe young people, these are quite, you know, deep and meaningful conversations. But then as we get older and we marry and we have children, we, you know, maybe I was busy and we have less meaningful conversations because it's just about work and the kids and the schedule and who's picking up who, where we go. And it just becomes less, these conversations just become less fulfilling. So I think there's a lot of room for being a good listener and having like deeper conversations with people, and this leads to much more understanding, especially if you're living abroad and if you're in another country, like you've severed a lot of contact with your friends who are in native country, and you have to make new friends. And you know, if you don't meet interesting people, your life can be a little bit like, depends on what type of person. Maybe you don't like people, you're happy reading books and learning a lot of interesting things. But if you like to have nice conversations with people, then ask some really relevant and interesting, engaging questions can lead to some wonderful relationships and some wonderful discussion that nurture your soul as an individual. Well, my friend, I think we should leave it there before your power. You have your power drop off or something.
And then I'll be in the dark.
I know these problems of South. So next week. Well, thanks again for joining me, buddy. I'll get you back.
Thank you.
Well, I'm becoming a permanent fixture now. I like that. And we'll discuss next week a little bit about emphatic listening. So, you know,
sounds good.
Listening to people and understanding what they feel as opposed to just like the facts. And I think then the following week we'll wrap things up by looking at some techniques that we would suggest to help you improve your listening skills in terms of being a language learner. Okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good, buddy. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. This is the start of a new year for us because in September, October is when the school year starts in the Northern Hemisphere. So lots of exciting and new things coming up on the Art of Business English over the next 12 months. I hope everyone enjoyed revisiting some of the most popular episodes from the last 12 months in the 2020 summer series. And if you guys have any questions or any, you'd like to drop us any comments, then you can below, if you're watching the YouTube video, you can drop us a comment on in the comment section on the blog at The Art of Business English, or you can just send us an email at aobe@theartofbusinessenglish. So that's aobe@theartofbusinessenglish. Or you can find us on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. It's all there. Okay, so that's it from me. That's it from Loic. Thanks again, Loic.
Yeah, thank you.
See everyone next week. Take care. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye.